Hi, everyone. It's Plastic EP coming in from Mars. No, not really. Melbourne, Australia. Well, let me tell you, I've got Nigel Pearce with me because he likes being on the show. Seems to be on nearly every one now. And I've also got now a special guest, David Stark, who's written a fantastic book. It's All Too Much. It's got one of the greatest Beatle covers I've ever seen on a book. I've got to pay compliments to you, David. Who was the artist?
Oh, thank you very much, Plastic. Well, she's a wonderful artist in Canada named Ingrid Black, and she did this painting I happened to see on the internet. I was looking for a suitable cover for the book. This was nearly 3 years ago or 2.5 years ago, and I came across Ingrid and her site, and she's done a lot of portraits of music people, not just music, but others as well. And I just saw this picture, and it's fantastic, and it summed up everything about my book and the period which I kind of had my heyday in 1967 to 68, 69, and it just, you know, the portraits, I'll just move a bit over so you can see them all. They're just wonderful. And they're very interesting, the way she's done them. And you have to look at the picture very carefully because they're quite intricate portraits, and she's a wonderful artist.
That's great. Now, David, if you hold up the book in front of you, we'll be able to see it.
Here we
go.
Just
hold that up right in front of you, higher over your head. Now, David, I want to ask you, recently had an event, right? When I'm in an event, you participated in something in Twickenham, right? And you were the drummer that played Hey Jude. Tell me all about that, because the world doesn't know.
No, this was quite something quite historic and special, whereby a Dutch TV crew are making a 6-part documentary about the Beatles for broadcast next spring. And it's hosted by 2 guys, singer-songwriter guys in Holland called, what are they called? Nick and Simon. They won the X Factor there, or they were on the program. They're very, very popular in Holland. So they're hosting the show. They came over with a full film crew to film loads of scenes and people in London and Liverpool. And they interviewed me twice, actually, people like Tony Bramwell, the Quarrymen in Liverpool, all sorts of people. They spent a week here. And they said, David, we're going to end up, we're going to do a finale, and we booked Twickenham Film Studios, and we're going to recreate the Beatles' Hey Jude session from 1968. And I thought, this is nuts, but what an amazing idea. It's never been done. I've been outside the studios, but I've never been inside. So I said, well, if they're going to do it, they need a band behind them. And they said, we do. Do you know anyone? I said, yes, I play drums and I've got my band. So, so my band is, we had 2 of my bandmates from the Trembling Wilburys tribute band, which we play a lot of gigs. And so myself, Mike on bass guitar, Steve on keyboards, we rehearsed the night before doing Hey Jude. And then the next morning, first thing, we're at Twickenham Film Studios. Enormous place, absolutely, it really hasn't changed. It's just a huge empty studio, and they were all there. They set up a drum riser for me, and it was all empty and cold apart from a few film people, the sound engineer, and people involved with the production. So, and I brought my drums with me, set them all up. Mike and Steve brought their bass and keyboards, and then we got going, you know, rehearsing with the 2 guys, and had a great time. And we recorded the song, but they cut it down for TV purposes. They cut it down by about half, so they missed out on a verse and a chorus, and they kind of went straight to the ending. But then they had an invited audience as well, with lots of our friends and people who came and surrounded us, just as the audience did in the 1968 film shoot, which was actually for the David Frost show at the time, and everybody's seen it, and it's incredible. I wish I'd been there. I narrowly missed out going to that session because I was at the Yellow Submarine premiere in July '68. You can see the film frontage behind me, but I was in the cinema, but I heard that they gave out invites or pieces of paper on the street during the premiere for people to come along to Twickenham to be part of that film shoot. So I missed out on that, but I can't believe that over 50 years later, I'm playing Ringo, I'm playing Hey Jude on the very same spot that he did. It was quite incredible. And it will be shown on Dutch TV next April, I believe. And I've got some pictures of rehearsals, but we're not supposed to release anything, but I put a couple up on Facebook anyway. But it was fantastic.
Yeah, David, I want to ask you what kit you were playing. What was your kit, your drum kit?
My kit is, I've got a silver pearl kit. It's not a Ludwig like Ringo, but it kind of looks the part. Also, what I did, I made a drum head of the book, of my book cover. I turned it into a circular picture. I put it on the bass drum. So I'm not only playing with the band, I'm plugging my book in it as well.
Now that's great. So Nigel's got a book out called Inside Number 3. And of course, you know, that's Apple Studios there. And I told everybody, I said, he's going to do a book called Inside Number 3. He should put a poster so everybody that goes there can see the plug for the book Inside Number 3.
Sure, definitely.
Well, first of all, David, it's nice to be at last an official author on the greatest group of all time. And like you collected, I've collected stuff as well. And I had the advantage, I have to say, of that one of my relatives was actually working for EMI record pressing, and actually worked there for 35 years. And she's no longer with us, but she got permission to go through the waste bins and go through the reject bins, etc. She got me letters and memos and things.
Wow.
Which is what I've tried to assemble together. And that's why I started to do this book. We've only got volume 1 here because that's the only one that's out. But she got me copies of letters and photographs and press statements and things. I've actually got a copy of, say, things like Mary Hopkins' press invitation. And I've actually got a bag carrier for one of the Badfinger albums and things like that. So it's a different slant on our favourite group. And I just want to know, what inspired you to start actually collecting? And like I suppose it must be very similar I did, but what actually started you on, hey, wouldn't mind collecting that? Or did something come across your path and you built on it?
Well, I just, my whole life since I was 10 years old, heard the Beatles for the first time, January '63, and became a complete Beatles nutcase and fan as a young kid. And I started my Beatles scrapbooks very soon after that. Must have been about February, March '63. And I kept my scrapbooks going right through the '60s. Well, they are incredible documents at the times of all the press cuttings I could find from the music papers, national papers, magazines. So I've still got all those. And then, lucky enough to meet them on various occasions, as described in the book. And then I haven't got a huge collection, but I've got some very nice personal items signed by John, Paul, George, and Ringo for me over the years, which, they were, I never paid for them. They were things I got them to sign, and I'm very, very lucky boy to have them. And I picked up a few other things along the way, but it's not a huge collection, but I'm just, very proud of having met them, and especially meeting John, who was always my favorite Beatle. Met him a few times, and even sent me a postcard once in 1969, which sadly, as described in the book, I managed to lose. But anyway, I met him. That was the thing, and I've met Paul many times. In fact, Paul and Ringo were at Abbey Road Studios last night for the premiere of Mary's new documentary about the studios. And literally, I'm about under 10 minutes away. I'm sitting here at home. I just saw it on TV. They interviewed Ringo, and I thought, where was my invite? Should have been there, along with Elton, Noel Gallagher, and everybody else there last night. So, they forgot. It must have been in the post, and we got a postal strike. So, dear, oh dear.
Well, these things happen. As I say, I must admit, I've done a little bit of what you have done. I've actually been to Apple. I've stood on the roof where they get back, and I've sat on the floor on the basement studio where John sat under the piano to do the Long and Winding Road. I sat on the very same spot where he sat. And so I've done a little bit of that. And I went back to Apple about 4 years ago. And it's amazing how much the place has changed in the street. It's locked up now because the people have moved out yet again. But it's amazing how the view has changed when you look over the rooftops to what it was on Let It Be, Get Back. And you see it now, it's changed completely, but the character of the place is still there. And that's absolutely fantastic. And so I've done a little bit of what you have done. And because of what my aunties were and where they were, I say they got me bits and pieces. I haven't got the world's greatest collection, as I said, but I've got a lot of things that people probably haven't seen, which is one of the reasons why I started the book's book plan off, and it's gone very, very well. I've actually got the mono test pressings, CD copies of Abbey Road and Let It Be. So now I've actually got every album now in mono, and a lot of the fans, obviously, sadly, haven't got Abbey Road or Let It Be, but I've actually got those. And I've also got a copy of the Revolver Test Mono and Test Stereo pressings. They're on CDs, but they are copies of those recordings, and they're slightly different from the Reese versions and all 4 of the albums.
And that's amazing, Nigel. But I want you to tell David about your relative, how she went to the pre-show before Please Please Me, and they performed. Just go through that. Right.
Well, my relative had just started then. To say she was my mum's sister. She's dead now. And so is her other sister. They're both dead, sadly. But she, in 1963, I think must have been January or very, very early February, she just started as a record presser, and she got invited to go to Manchester Square up in London, and she saw that concert. George Martin was there with the 4 Beatles, Brian Epstein. She was searched, so there was no cameras, so no pictures could be taken. There was about 300 people at that concert. They only did 6 songs.
Which concert? Where was that?
Manchester Square, just before the prior release of the album and the single "Please Please Me."
Oh.
It was their first sort of gig in London for EMI proper, although it wasn't a proper gig. But she was there, and she said they did Twist and Shout. I saw her standing there. Love Me Do, Ask Me Why, Please Please Me, and P.S. I Love You. That was it. Just the 6 songs. That's all they did, and the only published photographs there are, and I think you've got some, David, is the very early ones with the Beatles on the drums with the little spots at the top of the B, like the italic you write it, and that's what they used. And she was there on that. And she was there on that occasion.
I just got to say, there is a photo on the net from that concert. They put it out like it's an official photo of them in their Beatles suits, and they're playing, and that's where they're playing. And it's got all the Please Please Me albums behind them.
That's right. It's in like heart shape. That's quite correct, plastic. Well done. Well spotted, sir. But my auntie was there, David. She was there in that 300, sort of just over 300 plus audience. And she came back and saw my mum the very next day. I was only 9. And she just said to my mother, just saw a group last night. They're going to be big. We don't know how big, but they're going to be big. And that's all she said.
Oh, that's fantastic. And I felt the same as soon as I heard them with singing Please Please Me, which Alan Freeman on BBC Radio, Pick of the Pops, that's the first time I heard them, and I was just transfixed by the sound. I had no idea who they were. I remember to this day listening to it at that moment and thinking, who the hell's this? Up to then, I was into Cliff Richard, The Shadows, Adam Faith, all the stars of the day, but the Beatles came along and they literally changed my life. They absolutely did. And I was, from that moment on, for 5 years, from 63, maybe till 67, 4 years, I only ever bought Beatles records. I wouldn't buy anybody else until I started buying like the Who, Jimi Hendrix and people in 67. But I was totally faithful to the Beatles for the first few years and bought every single record on the day of release, every album. And I think about it now, and what the 60s were. They changed everything. They absolutely changed everything.
Do you believe in synchronicity, David?
Yeah, definitely.
Well, what you experienced, I experienced probably February 1963. I was 9 years old, and I saw and heard the Beatles do Twist and Shout. And I saw the little bit of film on a very grainy TV that they did in Granada Studios with the black and white Twist and Shout, and it transfixed me. It did exactly to me what it did to you.
Sure.
And I made it a goal of mine to get a copy of that piece of film, whether it's on videotape or whatever. And in 1978, I got one.
Oh.
And I've got a copy, and I've had it cleaned now. I paid a couple of £100, and I've got the 3 minutes absolutely cleaned and restored. And I've actually got a copy of it now. And even when I play that at home, that film still does exactly the same. That black and white image at Granada Studios with the shadows up the wall is very, very, very futuristic. And I'm amazed that nobody in today's music business has tried to copy the concept.
I just got to say something, right? In Australia in 1964, the Beatles came here. One of the best concerts you ever seen at Festival Hall, West Melbourne, right? That's where it was. But what you got to understand is, in 1964, I'm 6 years old, so I don't understand the mayhem. But I want to explain to you. Channel 7 was showing it live when they're at the Southern Cross. And what happens is there's so many people outside the Southern Cross, there was giant glass. And all I was hearing from the reporters was, this is insanity. If that glass breaks at the front of the hotel, kids are going to get killed. Like, it was a real security issue, because that wasn't like safety glass. That's real glass. And everybody was pushed against the wall, and everyone was on trees, and the whole street was full. But what happens is Ringo Starr, someone tore off his Christopher medal, right? St. Christopher medal, I think it was. And he put an appeal out to get it. And then later it was returned. But I'm just saying, it was crazy here in Australia, and especially in Adelaide, when 300,000 plus, all of Adelaide came out, the biggest they've ever seen. It will never be repeated. No band has ever experienced that in 1964. And they weren't even meant to play there, but they organised it. They had a big campaign there, and they pushed the radio, got in touch with the right people, and they made them go and play there. And it was like one of the biggest things that they went to Adelaide. And you've got to understand, they came to Essendon Airport, right, which wasn't a big airport here. And they drove them from Essendon all the way into the city, and all the way there was groups of people on the side of the road all the way to the city. And Essendon's outside of Melbourne. So I can tell you firsthand, and I really remember that picture of Jimmy Nicol being in Essendon Airport on those chairs waiting for his plane to go. That was front page news on the Herald Sun. Just so you know, I remember that day clearly. And it was like, you know, it's etched in my mind because I'm here, you know, and they're things that stand out. But as I said, at that age, 6 years old, I just know what happened, but didn't understand it.
It was the biggest. Yeah.
It was. I've actually got a video of that concert, and I've actually got a first class recording of it as well.
Well, they put it on HD. It's on YouTube if you want to see the Festival Hall concert of the Beatles, and it's unbelievable.
Yeah, when I look at the footage, it's so many. It just reminds me of a US presidential cavalcade. You know, I think of JFK when I see it. It was just extraordinary, wasn't it? Quite
mesmerizing.
It's crazy. Anyway, David, I want to ask you now, what else has been happening now? Like with all these releases of Paul McCartney box set, Ringo Starr box set. I mean, I'm honest with you, with Revolver now coming out again, you know, because they're able to strip every sound down and remix it completely. I mean, it's really a boom for the Beatles, all this stuff that comes out, because everybody buys it.
I know that. That's why the country's going broke. We're all we can't afford. Nobody can afford all these releases every other week. It's mad right now.
And also, I've got to say, Beatle books. I can't keep up with the amount of Beatle books coming out every week. I'm serious. I know what's coming out, and unless it's a special book, it's not going anywhere. It's just like, it's mind-blowing that there's more Beatle books being written every single week, and I can't even keep up.
I agree. It's totally nuts. It really is. So I can't, I went to the bookshop the other day. I saw a couple of books I've never heard before. They're just out there all of a sudden. And there's also a new book right now about Abbey Road Studios. I've never heard of it, so I saw it in the shop the other day, and there's loads of stuff. It just can't keep up with it. So I'm just pleased I got mine out.
They're still like the manna from heaven. I think it's unique, David, and you obviously would agree with Plastic, that the world is still grasping anything that's new from the Beatles, and the attention and fan adulation towards the group demands that be the case. No other group has ever come close. I mean, and I put the Stones, Led Zeppelin from the 60s and early 70s. I put Michael Jackson in there from the 80s for a brief period. I will even look at the legacy of Madonna, Oasis. Nobody even comes close. And at the end of the day, why? It was just something that was not just at the right time, the right sound. They had something mesmeric that went right through their very core. The music, the songwriting, the playing, the image, the way they spoke, the working class attitude. It all gelled to make a pot-boiling mixture that was, shall we say, irresistible.
I'm going to show you guys a book, which I guarantee you have not seen. Are you ready for the test?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
That's a John Lennon book, and that's the play of In His Own Right. That is the book. Do you see that? Have you ever seen that in your life?
Well, actually, I've got a copy in my bedroom behind me, signed by John.
The same book?
The same book.
That's amazing. Don't you reckon that's an amazing book, though?
It's great.
David, hold up the front of your book and then show us the signature. And if you keep it to your body, we can see it. So glad you got the book, David. Now show us John Lennon's signature.
Here he is.
How great is that?
Wow.
That is unbelievable.
Yeah.
You get 10 out of 10, you make my book worthless.
And I've also just...
Yeah, I can see that, Nigel.
I got these as well. Oh, there you go.
There's the test pressing.
These ones.
Did he sign those three too?
I can't remember.
Just have a look which one he signed, David. No problem.
Just having a look. No, these aren't signed.
Okay.
But I've just opened one. This is kind of strange.
Okay, go for it.
I've just opened this one of the Spaniard in the Works, which I haven't looked at for years. And I'm just looking inside. I've got a card here, a little card. It's from the Sin Lennon Beatle Club, Cynthia Lennon Beatle Club in Minnesota. And it says, this certifies that Frida Kelly, who was the secretary of the Beatles fan club, is a member of the Sin Lennon Beatle Club in Minnesota. Signed by Kathy Burns. I knew her. Yes, I had no idea I've still got this card. This is most bizarre. Anyway.
It came up now on the show, which is fantastic. We made you open up your books because you know what? I've got rooms of stuff. I can't open it. My wife wants to take all my stuff to the tip. And I said, she goes to me, why do you have all this stuff around you? I go, I live pop culture. When I'm here in the zone, I'm in the zone. Do you know how many interviews I've done? We're talking about something, and I've got everything one arm's length away from me, what we're talking about. It's the greatest thing when you just pile this thing all around you, around your computer, and it's like you're in the zone. And believe me, I'm in the zone 24/7 with rooms of stuff. And I said, when I die, do not throw this stuff out because it's all valuable.
Sure.
I got the rarest Beatle comic in the world. Dell #1. It's the one that's import version, not the 35 cents one. This is the one came from England. 2 shillings 7 pence or someone. It's the rarest Beatle comic in the world.
I do have a copy of A Spaniard in the Works, and I also have a copy of In His Own Right.
Yes.
So I saw I saw the cover on both those books. I've got my own copy of those. I've also got an original Brian Epstein Cellar Full of Noise.
Oh, lovely.
I've got one of those, and I've also got the original Brian Epstein 64 copy of Love Me Do, I think. The paperback that was issued as well. I've got a copy of that.
Oh, yes, I've got that.
I'm very proud to have those, but it's like everything else. It isn't to outdo anybody. I just saw your Spaniard in the works and in his own right. I thought, yeah, I got a copy of them. So culture spreads its wings and infiltrates wherever it should.
Okay, and everyone out there, we want you to get these fabulous Beatle books, starting with David Stark. It's All Too Much. Tell everyone where they can buy the book, David.
The easiest way, Plastic, is go to the website, itsalltoomuch.net. And you can either buy a signed copy directly from me or go to Amazon or buy the audio book. All the options are up there. Itsalltoomuch.net.
Right, well, it's not too much for the world. Go out and there and buy it. Now, Nigel Pearce, tell them where they can buy Inside Number 3. And the joke is that number 3 is locked, right?
Look, number 3, sadly, is empty yet again. But the website, as I've said to David, while you are scurrying around for your purple book, Plastic, it's www.insideandoutsidenumber3.com, and you follow it straight to the sales link. And as David, it's all very easy. And if you ask me nicely, I'm sure we can get one autographed as well. And David, I think you and I should swap books, because I think it's great to meet you today. And have heard so much about you. It's nice to put a name to the face, or is it a face to the name? I never get it the right way round.
I want to thank everybody for watching the show with these two fantastic guests. Thank you so much, David.
Thank you. Thank you, Plastic.